The interesting question when we talk about trans women in sport is fairness. And everything comes back to what we consider fair and what we consider equitable in women's sport in particular. I am a female hockey player. I transitioned when I was 17 back in 2000. And I have currently been playing the sport for about 15 years in total, and 7 years on the bounce since I went back to university in 2016. The thing for me has always struck me that hockey, and most sports in particular, when we talk about fairness, we're not talking just about bodies. We're also talking about uh, equity of opportunity, such as funding, parents, the schools you went into, the coaching you had, all of the things that when you're a child go into making you an athlete when you become an adult. There's also the issue as well that when it comes to sports like hockey, often we are having to pay to play the sport. So it's also as much about your spare time as it is about your skill level. And especially when you play on the Saturday league, like I do, virtually nobody is getting paid to play the sport. Virtually everybody is paying subs, paying membership fees, paying to get to the matches, paying for teas, paying for kit, paying for training. There's a whole range of things that go into sport that are not entirely obvious. And this makes it complex when we talk about fairness, because if we just talk about solely about bodies, especially in a sport like hockey, even soccer, straight football, it's your determination, your passion, wedded with all those other factors that go into what I would say is fairness in sport. Because if you don't have the money or the time or the access to a club, a pitch, training, etc., if you've got other commitments that you've got to commit to, it's very difficult for that to be seen as fair and reasonable. Because every team you play against is always going to have players who invariably have got more money, have got more time, have got better coaches, better access to training, have got the ability to purchase sticks, and in my case, as a goalkeeper, being able to purchase the equipment yourself. For instance, I own my own kit, which puts me in a very different position from people who have to borrow kit from their clubs. I've got the freedom to be able to train with whoever I like, play with whoever I like, and I can then use my kit if I want to go and do a warm-up session, if I want to go and do something in my spare time. I have the ability to do that. Now, is that fair compared to all the other keepers who haven't got access to their own kit? And these are the sort of questions that never get asked when it simply comes down to bodies and comes down to genetics. The issue with genetics is also quite a controversial one, because in all sport, what makes sport is there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. And genetics alone isn't going to necessarily separate one from the other. In hockey, you have women who are maybe 6 foot tall versus women who are 5 foot tall. And there's an argument to be made that shorter women have an advantage because they've got more agility. Indeed, if you go and watch any top level hockey, it's very rare that you'll get a very tall female hockey player, because most of the skilled hockey players tend to be within a medium height range. Now, on the team I'm playing at the moment, you've got a girl who is 5 foot, and you've got a woman who is 6'1", and I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm about 5'8", 5'9". So it's very interesting that when we talk about genetics, when we talk about height, when we talk about weight, when we talk about bone density, hormones, testosterone, etc., there's already this huge disparity in sports, both male and female, that simply to go trans women, a 6'5" trans woman competing against a 5 foot girl, it doesn't happen very often. In fact, I would go as far to say that you're more likely to see a 6'2" woman playing against a 5' woman. And so already you're seeing a lot of these arguments about fairness being able to be picked apart even by the current nature of the sport by itself. So it's not a simple conversation to have. As a hockey player, I can very much point to England Hockey's rules and regulations that very clearly state that it's trans inclusive. But yet there's also, when it comes down to sports like rugby, where you've got a lot of physical contact, when it comes down to individual sports like athletics and swimming, there's nuance involved. And it's not as simple as going and saying all trans women should or all trans women shouldn't. On a personal level, I'm very much more on the end of trans women should, but I'm also keenly aware that, especially when you've got full contact sports, it's a lot more of a negotiated process, and it's more of a conversation. And yes, potentially you could argue that I'm being a hypocrite when I say that. However, it's not as easy or as straightforward just to simply go yes or no. There's this shades of grey in the middle that you have to be aware of when you talk about this conversation. Now, as a hockey player, it's very easy for me to defend my role in the sport because I'm a keeper, I'm not an outfield player. My skill set is different from a lot of outfield players. You talk to anybody in the sport and in people, you will hear that people say that goalkeepers are a bit insane. There's a degree of madness being a keeper. But, and this is the interesting thing, is that when I talk about these issues, this isn't me coming at it from a, oh, I want to be involved. I've been involved in this sport since I was 17, since I was 18. And that over the last 24 years nearly, it's interesting seeing how this conversation has gone from being, okay, yes, fine, whatever, you can be involved. And what it took at the time was a doctor's note, to one now where it's such a political issue and it's sucking the oxygen out of this. I'm not demanding a right. I'm not saying I should do this. I'm already doing this. People are already happy for me to do it. People are already comfortable with me doing it. Therefore, I'm doing it. It's not as if this is a new thing. It's not as if this has suddenly happened in the last 3 or 4 years. This is something which has been happening for 24 years already. So I think that when we get fixated on biology and genetics, you lose sight of the bigger picture, and you lose sight of the fact that if you want true equity in sport, you've got to have better funding, better access, better pitches, not closing pitches down, not treating private schools as hot houses for sports like hockey. That state schools have the funding to enable children to do this, that every child gets the opportunity to play sport at a level where they can be involved and they're encouraged to be involved at. And then when they get to become an adult, they've got those core skills that enable them to both enjoy the sport and also compete at a level where they feel comfortable and confident doing that. It's telling that at my current team, every year there are tryouts, and you often get 200-300 girls coming from schools trying to get into my team. And it took me 3 years, 3 attempts to get into my current team. And only 35 to 40 girls actually get into the 7 teams in my club out of those 300. And even then, there's no guarantee that you're going to be put at a high level. You're likely to end up lower down the club. And that just shows the heightened expectations of the club I'm at. And when we talk about equity and fairness, it's a case of, is that process equitable or fair? Is it fair that you've got 300 potentially really good hockey players and only 35 get selected, 40 get selected? So this is all these sort of questions. And then you go to any of the other clubs in my local area, and you have a similar process. You're not just going to walk in, no matter how skilled you are, you're not just going to walk in and expect to be at the top. There's always going to be this graduation, this grading of players, this based on your skills, based on your ability to commit, based on your ability to actually be involved in the process, and your ability to train, your ability to be taking part on a Saturday. All of these things go into playing the sport. And especially when we're talking about, there's a conversation saying that if a trans woman's playing a sport, then she's denying another woman an opportunity. It doesn't work like that. It really doesn't work like that, especially in a team sport where you've got to be part of a team. No matter how good you are or how talented you are, you have got to fit in the team, but also be able to commit to that process. And you've got to commit to training, and you've got to commit to all those other things that go into that sport. So it's not a one-size-fits-all conversation. It's about going, what is equitable, what is fair, and not just starting at the point of bodies, but actually admitting that sport is much more intricate and complex than just simply, well, if they have that body, they're going to win. When the truth is, that is not the case. It takes a lot of time, a lot of commitment, a lot of energy, and a degree of luck of all the pieces, especially on a team sport, fitting together. So when we talk about fairness in sport, realistically, we need to be looking at the bigger picture, not just focusing on trans women are cheats, not just saying trans women don't belong, because that's far from the truth. Trans women are not cheats, trans women do belong. And ultimately, if you want a level playing field in sports, it starts with funding, it starts with schools, it starts with parents, it starts when children are 7, 8, 9, 10, being interested in taking part, as much as it does about the bodies that they develop as they grow up and grow older.